All right. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Liam, for having me. Thank you all for coming. Today, I'm excited to present a new paper entitled Identity and the Structure of Climate Risk Preferences. Motivating the paper is the idea that economic dislocations stemming from climate change are becoming increasingly likely and widespread. On the one hand, the physical damages wrought by continued global warming, unmitigated climate change, are increasingly threatening climate vulnerable industries, industries such as agriculture in drought prone areas, endangering their long run viability, endangering the security of workers within those industries. On the other hand, efforts to mitigate climate change, efforts to decarbonize the global economy, are generating mounting risk to climate forcing industries, industries dependent upon fossil fuels that may be increasingly devalued or phased out in the years ahead. While we can say that these climate risks are becoming increasingly intense and widespread, they're also marked by a series of deep uncertainties across the physical, socioeconomic, technological, and political domains, which all combine to create a situation that some have termed one of radical uncertainty. For example, we can say that the Earth is warming and it will continue to warm over the coming years with a high degree of certainty, but we don't have a clear enough understanding of all the intricate details of the Earth's physical climate system to say exactly what that mean warming will portend for specific localities and specific industries, the physical impacts that industries will have to deal with. Similarly, we can say that the future is looking increasingly gloomy for climate forcing industries, industries dependent upon fossil fuels, but we don't know if there's going to be some unforeseen technological breakthrough in the coming years that, for example, renders renewable alternatives substantially more competitive than existing fossil fuel technologies. So this syndrome of uncertainties clouds risks to specific industries, complicates efforts to evaluate each industry's likelihood of decline, evaluate risks to workers within those industries of losing jobs, of losing income. The question I take up in this paper is essentially, how do stakeholders break through this uncertainty? Amid this uncertainty, how do workers think about their own job security? How do investors evaluate their portfolios? How do communities weigh the costs and benefits of remaining reliant upon climate vulnerable or climate forcing industries? I propose that one means of doing so is to essentially guess what the government will do as climate risks materialize. Will the government step in and prop up climate forcing industries struggling under the weight of decarbonization? Will the government subsidize climate vulnerable industries struggling with the physical impacts of climate change, helping them to avoid decline due to these materialized climate risks? The literature in political science has identified a number of determinants of industry's access to the state, their access to subsidies, access to public backstops. These include industry output, the amount industries contribute to candidates for elected office, industry's situation in a country's electoral geography. I suggest that while there may be strong theoretical and empirical bases for these claims, these factors are likely to be opaque to broad swaths of the public. There may be factors that individuals just aren't attuned to, or factors that in the eyes of members of the public don't actually shed light on the future of a given industry very clearly. I suggest alternatively that people may use an ascriptive identity-based heuristic for evaluating climate risk, for evaluating industry's risk of decline as climate risks come to pass. The ascriptive makeup of an industry, the ethnic, racial, class, or gender-based composition of an industry's workforce should be highly salient and top of head. In racially divided polities, for example, race is something that people are highly attuned to. It's the subject of much discussion in social circles, much debate in political circles, much attention in the media, and it's likely to be readily observable. So people will likely have a clear sense of the racial makeup of a local industry. Moreover, people will often have strong prior beliefs about which identity groups can best get ahead in a given society, which racial groups are discriminated against in labor markets and interactions with the state, which groups are actually favored by the government, favored by political elites. What I argue in a nutshell is that when an industry is associated with a group seen as politically favored, a subjectively favored group, individuals should expect that industry to have unique access to state subsidies, have plentiful benefactors in government ready to step in and help that industry avoid decline as climate risks materialize. So in other words, I suggest that social features of industries may help clarify, rightly or wrongly, the severity of climate risk, the likelihood of industries declining as decarbonization proceeds, as climate change intensifies. In countries such as the United States, I expect race to be a uniquely important, uniquely influential determinant of perceptions of industry's access to state support, a separating indicator of industry's ability to avoid decline. As in other countries, climate risks have assumed clear racial characters in the United States. So climate forcing industries in the US tend to be disproportionately white. About 83% of US counties have a climate forcing workforce that features more white workers than you would expect based on that county's underlying demographics. Conversely, climate vulnerable workforces in the US are notably less white. About half of all counties have climate vulnerable industries with more minority workers than you would guess based on that county's racial makeup. To test how this basic argument applies to the situation of race in the United States, I conducted surveys of diverse samples of US voters earlier in 2021. I obtained about 1,600 responses through the online Lucid Theorem service. In these surveys, I embedded two pre-registered experiments. One assessing how the racial makeup of an industry affects perceptions of that industry's long-run viability, perceptions of risk to that industry. And the second, attempting to estimate how workers within an industry think about their own political efficacy, their ability to successfully mobilize for state support, depending on the racial makeup of their coworkers, the racial makeup of their industry. Subjects were shown short descriptions of climate risks and of subsidies in the survey. And I also elicited beliefs from subjects or elicited subjects' beliefs about the US racial hierarchy. So the extent to which they see the US government as favoring white Americans over minority Americans. So the first experiment showed subjects two hypothetical industries, one labeled fossil fuel reliant, taking the place of a climate forcing industry, the other labeled climate vulnerable. They were shown ideal type examples for each. One set of subjects were randomly told that the fossil fuel reliant industry principally employed Black workers, the climate vulnerable industry mostly white workers. Another subset of respondents were told the reverse, that the fossil fuel reliant industry was primarily white, the climate vulnerable industry principally Black. So the experimental randomization here is varying the balance of white and Black workers across these two industries. Upon being shown these two industries, subjects were asked two questions. They were first asked to evaluate each industry's likelihood of declining in the next decade on a scale from 1 to 5. And then they were asked to guess which industry would be likelier to win subsidies from the government in the next decade. Among subjects who noted that the government favors white Americans at the expense of minorities, I find clear differences between perceived risk to Black majority and white majority industries. A hypothetical white majority fossil fuel reliant industry was seen as about 13% less likely to decline than a Black majority equivalent, and a white majority climate vulnerable industry 20% less likely to decline than a Black majority climate vulnerable industry. So Black majority industries among these subjects were seen as substantially riskier, substantially likelier to decline as climate risk came to pass. I further find that white majority industries were seen as about 19 percentage points likelier to win subsidies than Black industries. And I find a close correlation between guesses of subsidy intentions and perceptions of decline. People who said that the fossil fuel reliant industry would be subsidized tended to be more optimistic about that industry's prospects in the next decade. The second experiment asks how workers in an industry might think about their own ability to acquire support from the government. Subjects were asked to imagine that they worked in a Black majority workforce and also in a white majority workforce. Among subjects who reported that the government favors white citizens, mobilization was seen as much more effective if they were employed principally alongside white coworkers. They expected their elected officials to be much more receptive to calls for support than if they worked alongside primarily minority workers, Black workers. Conversely, among subjects who denied any white favoritism in government, mobilization was actually expected to be more effective if they worked alongside Black coworkers. They expected being in a white-dominated industry to actually reduce their ability to acquire support from the state. To conclude, collectively, these results indicate that prior beliefs about group favoritism, expectations that the government is biased towards some identity groups may help resolve climate uncertainties, may help people develop expectations about industry's long-run viability, about their own job security in light of all the complexities of climate change and decarbonization. On the one hand, this suggests the potential for a moral hazard when it comes to workers in given industries. I find some evidence to suggest that working alongside groups seen as politically favored may disincentivize exit. You may choose to remain in place, confident that the government will come to your aid should your industry come under threat. But there's an important catch to note here, which is that those likeliest to see an industry as favored also tend to be those disconnected from that industry. So minority Americans tend to be those who see white majority industries as most favored. By definition, those minority Americans are unlikely to work in those white dominated industries. So the greatest attitudinal effects here may occur outside of these industry workforces themselves. One possibility is that a general sense that the government is biased towards identity groups in climate forcing industries, such as white Americans, may foster a general sense of climate pessimism, cast doubt on whether the government will ever actually impose costs on those climate forcing industries. And one possibility is that this might redirect people's focus from mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to adaptation, a means of bolstering climate resilience without stepping on the toes of favored groups in climate forcing industries. Adaptation may be seen as a more attainable, achievable goal. Altogether, this paper, I think, suggests that identity conflicts may have important implications for patterns of political contestation around climate and also patterns of mass political mobilization that we may see in the coming years as climate dislocations intensify. I'll leave it there. Happy to take any comments or questions or suggestions that people have. Thank you.